Hey guys, SGT here with another important update, this time from Kenneth Anton, whose new book, Popsicle Man, I think provides a great metaphor for those who are asleep in today's society and do not recognize the criminal cabal that has taken control of our republic and our society and is carrying out false flags even as we speak in Boston. We saw it on 9/11. We see it repeatedly. They also run our monetary system, and this book, historical fiction, called Popsicle Man, is something we're going to cover today with Kenneth Anton. Kenneth, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you very much, Sean, for letting me talk about the book. I appreciate the potential exposure that I might get. And also, I think it should be useful for your audience because I'm sure they're very interested in just who is behind the actions in controlling the monetary system in the U.S. and many other aspects of it, like the manipulation of currencies and gold and silver, recently that hit just last week.
Yeah, and I think what's important about this book as a tool to share with others who are asleep is that for those of us who are awake, Kenneth, Popsicle Man, this idea of a man by the name of Felix waking up from a state of cryonic freezing after many, many years and discovering the hidden powers lurking behind the scenes to control all major events, and discovering the historical context of these hidden powers and how they took control of the Federal Reserve in 1913. It's a pretty obvious metaphor for those of us who are awake, but for those who are asleep, it could be an excellent tool to wake them up. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about the book and help us understand why you decided to write this thing?
Okay, yeah, what you say is absolutely true. Felix has just woken from a state of cryonic preservation several years. And so he has no short-term memory, and his long-term memory is taking a while to come back. So he's like a clean slate, but he's got a journalistic mind. And he's staying with his sister when she shows him about how to use a PC. Then he starts his investigative work, and he's fascinated by certain key events like 9/11 and just what took place. And he looks deeper into the official story, and then he reads several articles from the alternative media about what they see as what happened and what caused it. Controlled demolition, and there are many sites that support this view, especially architects and engineers, who have nothing to gain by their viewpoint except to expose the truth. And they can see very clearly that the buildings World Trade Center buildings were brought down by controlled demolition. That these buildings could have fallen at the speed that they fell straight into their footprint by accident or by the attack by the planes. It had to be done by controlled demolition. So this is one of the key points. The second key point is who gained from 9/11, and that's a key aspect. And since 9/11, it certainly wasn't the Arab countries or the Muslims that gained from it, because then the U.S. started the war on terror and attacked Iraq and Afghanistan, and then after then Libya and Syria, and who knows, may move on to Iran. So these are the key questions that people have to ask themselves: who gained from 9/11, and how did the buildings actually collapse?
Well, let me ask you this, Ken. Did you write the book because 9/11 was a key event in your life, and maybe you're the Popsicle Man? I mean, did it help wake you up from your cryonic sleep state? Because you and I can both note the fact that on the back of 9/11, we see the militarized police in this enveloping police state, this police security state. We see it time and time again with the creation of the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11, the creation of the TSA after 9/11, the passage of the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, the John Warner Defense Authorization Act, an endless series of legislation and acts and unconstitutional wars of aggression based on the lie of 9/11. And for those who aren't familiar with false flag terrorism, it's time to get up to speed, because we saw it at the Gulf of Tonkin. We saw it with the anthrax attacks on Congress, the anthrax, of course, tracking back to Fort Detrick. We're seeing it in Boston with this bombing and private security forces on the ground there with wireless comm, with backpacks.
Right.
So we see this false flag, which was carried out on 9/11, carried out repeatedly by governments. And again, just to ask, is 9/11 what woke you up to all of this?
I think since I started getting on the internet and reading the alternative media, that really has been a slow process of waking up. And just briefly looking at the historical aspect, looking at the 200-year conspiracy behind this thing. I mean, one of the things when you look at these controlled events, you wonder who is this mysterious powers that be. I mean, we hear that phrase all the time, and the shadow government. Now, why doesn't a president reveal who this is? Why isn't this widely known who they are? I mean, it's a shadow government, and they're kind of hidden behind the scenes. It's the thing that really, I think this is the thing that motivated me the most, and that's why I looked into the historical aspect. And it goes back to 1815. It goes back to the 1700s with the Rothschilds, and the father had 5 sons, and he's a very sharp guy. I mean, he's a money changer, and he had a special relationship with Prince William in Germany, who was one of the wealthiest men in Europe. And he sent 4 of his sons out to countries around Europe to set up central banks. And I think the biggest success was Nathan, his son Nathan, who went to England. And again, this is an aspect of the Rothschilds. They're very smart and very manipulative, and also very sneaky. And after the Battle of Waterloo, he had his courier there who rushed back and gave him the information that actually the Duke of Wellington from England beat Napoleon, but nobody else knew it. So he took advantage of this knowledge, and very sneakily, he sold his shares in his stock shares on the London market, and with this, many other investors sold their shares as a ploy. And then when the market went down, he bought it all back up again, and that's where he made his fortune.
Right, because the market interpreted the Rothschilds selling as the fact that Napoleon must have won, which of course would have been the end of their society, the end of British reign, and so everybody followed Rothschild by selling. Of course, he had the truth, he had the real info 24 hours earlier than the government itself, and he bought up everything, bond stocks at pennies on the dollar. And Mayer Amschel Rothschild, the father of the Klan, said himself, and you note this, I quote, "Let me issue and control the nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws." So that's what we're up against today. And if we can just bridge back to the U.S. Federal Reserve being formed 1910, really ultimately getting passage in 1913 on the backs of a criminal Congress, the cabal is comprised of powerful clans, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Warburgs, Kuhn-Loebs, and it spans 2 centuries. Their monetary control, first in England, which you just noted, and then now the U.S., affords these clans colossal wealth and inevitably power and control. It's very important that people understand what we see in this U.S. security, this police state now, all bridges back to the control of the monetary system. And James Corbett, whose work I really respect, he just noted that recently in an interview, and I thought it was compelling to hear him say it, because the same is true with me. I woke up because of 9/11 and false flag terror. I learned what false flag government-sponsored terror is. I learned the history of it, and then I learned about our monetary system, and that's when all the bells and whistles went off. That's when all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place for me, and that's what I think is great about your book, because it gives people a chance to understand all of that stuff in some historical context with historical fiction.
Absolutely right. I think the historical context is important, because the Rothschilds, their fortune in the 19th century. They took over the control of the Bank of England, which was the central bank. This is at the height of the British Empire. So they had everything going for them. The other 3 brothers controlled the central banks in Austria, Italy, and France. So it was the whole family that was pulling the money in. To move on, yes, the next objective after the U.S. Revolution was to set up a central bank in the U.S., and that they achieved in 1913. But again, this was not done easily. I mean, they took them years to work on this and to form allegiances with the Rockefellers and and the J.P. Morgans and other major banks in New York. The thing is, it was ever since the American Revolution, it was their goal to get back to even though England lost the war, to set up central banks, and they did succeed in setting up the first Bank of the United States and then the second Bank of the United States with 20-year charters. But then Andrew Jackson, when he became president, he closed the last central bank, and there wasn't any other until the 20th century. And then it was a major effort and a very ingenious way. Rothschilds engineered this conspiracy to work with the banks in the major banks in New York, and with key people in Congress, to get the law passed in 1913. From that date on, and that's almost 100 years to bring it up to the present time, they could do whatever they wanted, because the way the Federal Reserve was set up, there's no auditing, there's no control restrictions over it. It's a completely independent organization, and they can get away with anything they want. And there were certain people in Congress over that time that tried to challenge, like the Lindberghs and some other key senators that tried to challenge it. And he had his baby kidnapped, and one of the key members in Congress who challenged him, and it was ready to shut them down. They tried to kill him. So these people, let's say the Rothschild dynasties, banking dynasties that are associated with them, they will stop at nothing. They will stop at nothing to maintain their power and their control over the United States and England. And with the monetary control, they have political control. And that basically they have turned the U.S. from a republic into a fascist state. And they work together with major corporations, which depend on financing, and the Federal Reserve is a financer. So they have allegiances, or let's say they share directorships with the leading corporations. I mean, it's a cross section of all the major corporations in America. So they've got a very tight control with their oligarchy. Other aspects of this dynasty, the Rothschild dynasty, the banking dynasty, is they make a lot of money on wars. For example, the Russian Revolution, they had some opposition against the czars of Russia, and so they had again been planning this for some time, and they financed Lenin to go in 1919 to go ahead and they already had started spreading communism before, and then in fact the czar had resigned, but that wasn't enough. So they with $20 million in gold to go ahead and really finish it off. And then when there was a civil war within Russia for 3 years, and then when Lenin took over, I mean, he was just brutal. I mean, he killed the czar and all his children, and the Rothschilds took advantage of the wealth of the czars. And Lenin, what did he do? I mean, instead of this idealism of giving the proletariats, freedom and rights to run the country, just totally the opposite. He started massacring people, anybody that challenged the government, killing them by the millions, sending them away to the gulags, and the same with Stalin, who followed after him. So that's an aspect that has to be considered, and this is what worries me about what's happening with the police state in America today.
That's right, the police state in America today, and it's pretty easy to actually fast forward and bring this all into our present day history, and tie it all together, Ken, because as I said earlier in this interview, these are the same forces. These are the forces that have always been in control, that have been in control of our republic for so long, that are in control today. You note the Rothschilds, you note the Rockefellers, the Warburgs, the Morgans, and the incredible wealth and power they wielded in the early part of the century, in the late part of the last century, and you take a look at their puppets, right? You take a look at the Bushes, Prescott Bush, his sons, two of which became president, one who headed up the CIA. You take a look at his son, George Sr.'s role in what went down in Dallas with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. He doesn't know where he was that day. He doesn't remember. There's lots of evidence to suggest he was there with boots on the ground. You take a look at the Dulles brothers, right? John Foster Dulles and his brother Alan, who were Wall Street power brokers, who helped usher in Hitler, who essentially were Nazis. Did we actually defeat the Nazis, or did the Nazis just all come here under Operation Paperclip? These are the people who have been in control and who are still in control. So as we see these horrible things go down, new false flags, 7/7 in London, okay, clearly a drill that went live that day. We know it. It's on the record. It's a fact. Same targets, same buses exploding, same subways blowing up. There's a drill underway that day, and the drill went live. We just saw it happen in Boston, on the ground there, in their tan pants, in their desert boots, in their military black backpacks, and the FBI will not address it. They will not address the fact that those men were there in Boston. And it's just an endless series of insults to those of us who are awake, but it's lost on the Popsicle Man. It's lost on the people who are asleep. We're surrounded in the society by Popsicle men and women. It kills me.
Let me just add, the historical part is the first theme of the book. The second is actually where the action takes place from 2010 to 2013. So it really deals with current events. And so that, therefore, after 9/11, when we get into the Department of Homeland Security and all of their actions, what's happening right now, and they're militarizing the police. They got some special budget where they can go ahead and buy military weapons and billions of bullets for their own use and for the police under their control. So it's a reenactment of the Russian Revolution. And this poor Popsicle Man who is woken up to these revelations, he tries to tell people, personally, his own sister, she has government contracts, so she doesn't want to hear anything about what he has discovered. And many other people that he contacts. So this is his biggest challenge. How do I get the word out? Because he can see that this is going to evolve into a revolution in the U.S. or even worse, the Gulag scenario in Russia, where millions of people are going to be killed. And when the subject up, that's a recurrent theme in here about Russia and how it could apply to the U.S. There's so many people, so many Americans that say, this is not Russia. We have democracy here. They don't know. They don't realize how brutal these people in charge can be. So that's really what the book deals with, and at least half the book deals with, the second half of the book. And how do you wake people up? This is the Popsicle Man's biggest challenge. How do you wake people up? How do you create a dialogue with them so they'll listen? One of the key phrases that I'm sure you're familiar with is cognitive dissonance.
Right.
I don't know why they came up with that phrase. It sounds
it sounds complicated, but normalcy bias, that's another one. We're immersed in a population, most of whom, the majority of whom are faced with cognitive dissonance and normalcy bias, and they don't want to know the truth, as you cited. Popsicle Man's sister in the book, she doesn't want to know the truth, but how many of us know people like that? I'm surrounded by people like that, my coworkers, immediate family.
And I think it's difficult. I've tried it, and you've tried it, and it's difficult to argue with people. They have their blinders on, and it's their sense of reality, and they just don't listen.
Even worse, Ken, they battle to protect their current paradigm. They battle to protect their illusion because their illusion provides them the comfort. Going home at night and flipping on the TV or going to a movie or watching a sporting event, that's a pretty good way of life. I've said this time and time again, if you're employed in this country, if you can put food on the table and you get a check every 2 weeks, life's still pretty good, even though 45 million people are on food stamps. If you're not one of those people, you don't have to face the ugly truth if you don't want to. And that's why I think so many people emboldenedly, vigilantly, militantly try to battle against the truth, do not want to hear it. They tell you to your face, I don't want to hear it. I don't even want to know if even what you're saying is true. What are you going to do about it? I don't want to know because I don't want my fragile little paradigm to be shattered. Meanwhile, unconstitutional wars of aggression are killing men, women, and children all over the planet as the Treasury is bankrupted. So sooner or later, the painful reality is going to become evident to everyone. Our job is to make sure they understand who was responsible and how it happened.
Well, let me just interject something here, which is reinforcing what you say. And that is another thing that I guess that has woken me up and has drawn me into the truth media, and that's what I would call your website and many others on the internet. They call it alternative media, which is okay, but truth media is really what it comes down to. The mainstream media, another thing that really got me motivated, because I got fed up with listening to the news, and sometimes I want to vomit. But I still look at CNN and Fox and the regular ABC, NBC channels, because I want to get that perspective. I don't want to just shut them out completely.
We want to know what the enemy is up to. We want to see the enemy's playbook, and we can see that every single night on CNN and MSNBC and Fox News.
Well, one of the things that struck in his investigation was, what is this? I mean, how did this happen? Where did the mainstream media come from? Why did they speak with the same voice? And a key element of the banker dynasties or the banker conspiracy is to buy up the media. And they started in the early 1900s. J.P. Morgan, he sent out some of his top people to look at newspapers. I mean, that was the main medium back in those days. And he found they selected 25 of the top newspapers, and he bought controlling interest in these newspapers, and he sent in his own editorial staff in each one of these. So this from that point, this is the early 1900s, J.P. Morgan was in there controlling the news media. The Rothschilds, they bought Reuters before the end of the 19th century, about I think 1895 or something like that, and they still own it. They still control it. And Reuters is like and now what has happened since that time is the oligarchy, the banking oligarchy, has bought up everything. They bought up all of the major newspapers. They bought up TV, broadcasting, radio, Hollywood. They own 90% of all the mainstream media, and in just the last couple of decades, it has consolidated to 6 major corporations, and that's an area of the book that I deal with. There, 6 corporations, and they pretty much all say the same thing.
Yeah.
So this is what we're dealing against. This is what the truth media has to deal with, and it's not easy, because how many people sit at home watching TV at night? TV is the main media, I think, that people listen to or are controlled by. And it isn't just information, it's mind control.
It is mind control. I just actually covered this recently, and I've quoted Michael Aquino, who was an Army officer involved in PSYOPs. He also is the founder of the Temple of Set. He's a Satanist. And Michael Aquino didn't even want to call it PSYOPs anymore. Upon his advice, he wanted to call it mind war, because that is what we are engaged in. We are in a mind war. And just to back up what you were saying about the Mockingbird media, let's take a look at some of these folks who give us the nightly news. Wolf Blitzer used to be one of the chief lobbyists for the state of Israel, okay? And who do we have over at NBC? We got Brian Williams, a proud Council of Foreign Relations member. We got Erin Burnett over at CNBC, CFR member, and proudly so, right? Who does she take her marching orders from? Right. Well, the CFR. What does the CFR have to say? Who do we have over at PBS? We have Charlie Rose. He's attended Bilderberg Group on numerous occasions. This is what we're up against, and I think your point's very good, that the Wall Street power elite and the City of London banksters own and control most of the media, the news media, and the information that the sheep will get in this country. And it's really disturbing, because it's very, very hard to battle against.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to realize that what they're up against, and I mean, you're not going to drag people away from their television sets, but this is the key thing. When Popsicle Man finally he kind of has a little bit of luck, but he looks at patriot organizations. He sees the danger ahead, and he kind of gets in line with one of them, and he becomes like a neighborhood leader. And it's literally small scale. He has to go around knocking on doors, stuff like that. And his main point is preparing, being a prepper. It's really basic stuff that he gets involved in, but incredibly, I mean, he lucks out, because he becomes part of a major network that he labels it neighborhood network, which spans the whole country. And what's neat is that as in the book we have a bank shutdown, bank holiday they call it, and there's some ulterior motive for it, but basically all the banks across the major banks shut down. And this is when he starts building up the neighborhood participation, because when people don't have money, and there's a limit how much they can get. I mean, the ATMs run out of money. They go to shop for food, and the food stores are running out of food because people are panicking. And when this hits, then he gets the attention of people. Then he can talk to them, because when they're angry, then this cognitive dissonance breaks down. Because if they don't have money and they don't have food, then believe me, then that's where he gets his neighborhood network, and he's able to communicate. It's a communications network, which in a way is versus the mainstream media.
Well, let me jump in, Ken, because you're absolutely right. When people are hungry, right, they pay attention. And sadly, though, when they're hungry, they're at their weakest, too. They're at their most vulnerable, because if you're too hungry, you're not going to be able to fight back. Let's just wrap this all up and tie it all together. We started with false flag terrorism and the groups that are really in control of most of these false flag acts of terror that we see, right? It usually points back to government or governmental-run agencies. And now we can see monetary financial terrorism happen time and time again, right? We can see it in Cyprus, where 2 weeks prior to the Cyprus theft, we saw hundreds of millions of dollars of Russian oligarchy bankster money flow out of Cyprus before that attack occurred. So we're going to see more and more acts of financial terrorism, and we're going to see more and more acts of brutal physical false flag terrorism. And what do you think we need to do in order to save ourselves and save our republic?
I think it's a good question, and I think it's your website and many other truth websites. That's a key thing, because you're vying against the mainstream media, and more people are getting fed up with the mainstream media, and they're coming to sites like yours. And from my point of view, I'm working together. Okay, we're trying to work towards educating people, to waking them up, and so it's knowledge. And this is kind of the point of the book. As things get really rough, as Homeland Security sends out SWAT teams to mainly go after veterans and even preppers and patriots, they're building this list, this terrorist list, which is absolutely phony. But as increases, then people react. And they start to get angry. And that's when Popsicle Man is able to push for demonstrations, peaceful resistance, and that's the key thing that I'm promoting there. So there is hope. That's what I'm saying. As the pressure increases, as people get angry, as the money comes out of their ATM accounts, and this concept of bail-in. I mean, can you believe this? I always thought I put money in a bank that's safe there. Now, what is this crap? The bank makes mistakes and they're going bankrupt, and they say, well, we can keep your deposits, but if there's derivatives there, no, we can't touch the derivatives because they belong to the banks. We can't touch them. We take your deposits. So people, as the screws tighten, people are going to get angry, and therefore sites like yours and books like mine, I hope, will give people some guidance and control the anger and give it a channel so that people can protest. And I don't want to talk too much about how the book ends, because it's got a surprise ending.
Well, yeah, let's not give it away. Let's not give it away. I think what we should do right now, I'm not sure how many folks will run out and buy the book, because most folks just don't have time to read anymore. But I would love it if you could sell some books here. Why don't you tell people where they can get Popsicle Man? I think it's on Amazon, and it's affordably priced, correct?
Yeah, it's reasonably priced. It's an ebook, a digital book, but you can read it on just about anything. You can read it on your PC. You can read it on a tablet, iPad, iPod. Okay, so you can go to Amazon.com and look for Popsicle Man, or I'm just starting. I have a website, just a one-page, popsicleman.net. You can go to that, and It has some basic information about what the book is about, and how to go to Amazon and that kind of thing. But I'll have to build up that a little bit more. So, but that's That is one way to look for it.
Let's just leave people with this. I guarantee that we'll see a comment or two under our video here that it will be from people that will say, "Oh, you had me until you brought up 9/11," right? That doesn't work anymore. If you're one of those people who's too cowardly to face the truth, then I pity you. You can go to your grave being a coward, because the false flag terror is really at the root of what plagues us here. Because if we continue to let them get away with false flag terrorism, if we continue to let them use the BS official story of 9/11, they will continue to use it for 100 years, and they will indoctrinate your children, and your children will be slaves. So if you want to be a coward, be a coward. That's your business. But don't even bother leaving the comments, because it doesn't work anymore. Any of us who are awake know you're a coward. So don't even bother with the comments. If you want to not be a coward, go look at Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which Ken spoke about earlier. Right. Go read some books by David Ray Griffin. Go look at the research done by Dr. Stephen Jones. Okay? Go look. Go read. Go figure this thing out, because we've handed it to you on a silver platter, and if you're too cowardly to care, then you're part of the problem. You're complicit with these criminals that have taken over this government, have taken over this society, and are going to destroy you and your family. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the cowards. I'm tired of the cowardly comments. So if you want to leave one, be prepared for about 100 thumbs down. Ken, I can't thank you enough for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope people go and get this book, Popsicle Man. Search for it on Amazon or visit popsicleman.net. So Kenneth Anton, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us, and let's do a follow-up sometime.
Sean, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, my pleasure. Guys, thanks for listening. As always, I don't say it enough, and lately I haven't been saying it at all in my interviews. I've just been signing off and saying goodbye to my guests. Right now, I want to say goodbye to the entire listening audience, because I really appreciate it. You guys are the ones that are helping us wage this battle. It's up to us to take our nation back, and I'm just proud to stand with y'all. Kenneth, we'll talk to you soon.
Good. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.